I, 31F, have been married to my husband, 33M, for 5 years, and we dated for 3 years before that. My parents are very relaxed, so they never forced me to do anything that I didn't want to or anything that I personally didn't feel like doing, but my mother-in-law was the total opposite. She was constantly nagging us to get married when we were dating because we were already over 25, and it was embarrassing for her to tell her friends that her son was still unmarried. And once we did get married, she demanded that we get pregnant. We got married because we felt that the timing was right, not because of my mother-in-law's nagging, but because I wasn't ready to have a child, and so we tried to explain to her that it was just not the right time for us, but she didn't stop, and for 5 years, she's been trying to convince us to have a baby. My father-in-law told my husband to just stay quiet and let her say what she has to say because my mother-in-law was the one in charge in their household, and while that's a good thing for girl power, it sucks for us personally because my mother-in-law is just really annoying and cares more about what the world will think than what we think. It's more important for her to be able to show off to her friends to win their approval, and her friends are all a bunch of old ladies in their 60s, so they only talk about their kids and grandkids and what's going on in their lives. My husband has told his mother to stop bugging us about grandkids several times over the years, but she's never paid any heed to his words. He even spoke to his father, but like I said, my father-in-law is just powerless when it comes to his wife and refused to say a word. He told us to just suck it up or else it would lead to a lot of drama and none of us would like it. We did that because we wanted to avoid any confrontation, but with time, it got harder to not snap at my mother-in-law. I finally lost my cool with her 2 weeks ago when they'd come over for dinner and I was trying to work in the kitchen, but she kept talking about some herbal tea that helps in getting pregnant. So I ended up telling her that if she's so interested in babies, then maybe she should have one herself instead of bothering me about it. That shut her up, and I don't even regret it, not after what happened today. She didn't bring up babies or pregnancy for the next couple of times that we met, which my husband and I were thankful for. We meet quite often since my mother-in-law lives close and has no boundaries, so she just drops in any time she pleases. But after my remark, she reduced the number of visits considerably, and even when she did, she'd only talk to her son and avoid me like the plague. I was kind of afraid that maybe I'd pissed her off really badly, and we couldn't afford to do that if we wanted to inherit all their money and house. I know it seems shallow and selfish to want to stick around your in-laws just for the inheritance, but they are quite well off, and my husband also believes that life will be easy for us if we have that sort of money. It's self-centered, but it's practical and is a huge part of the reason that we've even put up with my mother-in-law's crap for so long. And besides, we live near one another, so it seemed pointless to pick a fight with my mother-in-law over just a few annoying habits when we only needed to put up with her for a few years before my husband was finally promoted at his company and we moved to a different house. This house had been a wedding gift from my in-laws, which is why it was so close to them in the first place, but when we had enough saved, we'd definitely be moving out because my husband couldn't stand living so close to his parents either, as it really limited our independence, especially because of how nosy his mother is. Around 3 days ago, it finally happened, the promotion that my husband had been working towards for the past 5 years. All his hard work had paid off, and now, not only was he getting his own office, but he was also getting a huge raise. He works in a bank and I'm a realtor, so our salaries were enough to let us lead a comfortable life, but not enough for us to qualify as rich. After this promotion, though, we're rich. I don't mean to brag, but my husband did work hard and he paid his dues while I took care of the household alongside my job, since he also had to work late into the night on several occasions, so we've earned this. The thing that we were happiest about was the fact that we could finally move out soon and we wouldn't have to deal with his interfering mother anymore. He loves his parents, but even he agrees that his mother can be a little too much to handle sometimes, which is why he was sort of relieved that she wasn't coming over that often after I'd snapped at her. We decided to host them for dinner one last time before we started looking for houses, and I already had quite a few that I liked since I was in the business myself. It was a little premature on our part, but we really just wanted to let them know and celebrate this occasion. So tonight, we invited them over for dinner. My mother-in-law was in a mood when she arrived and hardly even smiled or said a word to me, but I didn't care about that. At the dinner table, it was only my father-in-law who did most of the talking while my mother-in-law sulked and refused to participate. After dinner, it was finally time for us to announce our big news, but before we could say a word, my mother-in-law stood up and told us that she had an announcement to make. We decided to let her go first because we wanted to save the best for the last, and I'm honestly so thankful that we did. Because she told us that she'd removed my husband from her will and was soon going to make sure that his father removed him from his will, too. That is, unless we're able to give her a grandchild within a year. She even told us that at this point, she didn't even care if we adopted or if we had a baby through surrogacy, she just wanted a grandkid and that was it. We were a shame and an embarrassment to her, and she couldn't take this anymore. We were accused of depriving her of the happiness of becoming a grandma on purpose, and unless that changed soon, my husband wouldn't get a single penny out of his inheritance and it would all go to charity instead. It was all just so ridiculous that we hardly had anything to say to her. Even my father-in-law was staring at her with an open mouth, so clearly she hadn't consulted him before making this decision, and he had no idea this was going to happen. I'm pretty sure that this was brought on by my behavior a few weeks back, but I hadn't thought that she'd take things this far and actually cut my husband out of her will. Unfortunately for her, that didn't feel like a real threat to us anymore. Maybe it would have felt bad a couple of months ago when we really would have needed her money, but not anymore since my husband was going to be earning more than enough. So we didn't have to count on his inheritance or help from his parents in case of any financial trouble at all. We'd be just fine on our own now. Which is why I told her the truth just a few minutes after she announced what she'd done and how we brought her shame. I filled her in on the purpose of the dinner that we'd hosted tonight, and once she learned that her son was now in a prestigious position at the bank, not just a mere employee, her face actually fell. She'd spent ages shaming my husband for how he wasn't doing enough in his career, but now, he was finally at a level where he'd have several people working under him, and he was relatively young as well, so it was a huge achievement for him, but my mother-in-law was ruining it all. So I told her that I wasn't going to let her stand here and spoil this day for us, and if she really felt this way, that we were an embarrassment for her, just because we were childless, then she should probably just leave. She was dumbfounded by my outburst because now, she knew that she'd messed up and she couldn't take back the words that she'd already said. Also, if we moved away and decided to cut ties with her, she'd no longer be able to brag to her friends about what a successful man her son was, because her son wouldn't even be visiting her anymore, and that'd be way more embarrassing than us not having a child. She probably realized these things just as soon as I told her that she needed to leave, since she couldn't just stand in our house and insult us, so she quickly tried to take it all back by putting on a fake smile, trying to congratulate her son and talking about how I always knew you had it in you and that grandkids can wait. All of a sudden. By then, my husband had also regained his composure after what his mother had announced and looked very upset. When his mother tried to hug him, he took a step back and finally snapped at her. For me, it was just 5 years of pent-up anger, since that's how long I've been married to my husband and had to deal with my mother-in-law, but my poor husband has had to deal with this woman his entire life, so I can't even imagine how difficult it must have been for her. It was years and years of built-up frustration that he finally let out today, and by the time he was done, he was in tears. My husband isn't a very emotional man, so it was really difficult to watch him tear up, so I told my in-laws to leave in a much calmer tone so that they'd listen. My mother-in-law looked very upset as well and tried to stay so she could talk it out with my husband, but I didn't want the situation to get worse and told her that she could talk to him later when we were all feeling less emotional. They finally left, and my father-in-law even tried to apologize, but it was too little and too late. He could have stood up for his son when he had the time, but he always let his wife bulldoze over him. After they finally left, I spent a good 1 hour or so trying to calm my husband down, since he was a total mess. He'd had a meltdown and was still very upset. I knew that his relationship with his parents was strained, at best, but now it was falling apart, and there was nothing either of us could do to change that. It was his parents who had to change, and it seemed unlikely that they'd do that now. They had their entire lives to be supportive and good parents, but they chose not to be, and that was on them. So now, when my husband is finally successful, I don't think they deserve to be part of our happiness anymore. My mother-in-law had always put my husband under an immense amount of pressure and had never made him feel like he was enough, while my father-in-law always just stood by and watched these things happen but never said a word against it. This is why when my mother-in-law called me around half an hour ago to speak to her son, I chewed her out and told her that after the things she'd said that day, she'd lost the privilege of speaking to him whenever she wanted to. She'd have to go through me first because I wasn't going to let her hurt my husband anymore. Of course, she didn't like that and instantly started arguing with me, but I wasn't having it and hung up the second her tone changed. My husband was sleeping and I didn't want him to be disturbed, so I chose not to argue with her pointlessly. Then, she sent me several texts claiming that it was my behavior that was causing problems between her and her son. I was the one at fault because first I refused to marry him even though I was well past the age of marriage, and now, I'm refusing to have a baby. She accuses me of only caring about money and turning her son into someone materialistic as well, which is why this promotion means more to him than a child does. It's been a while since, but I'm feeling awful about what she said. Maybe I am materialistic and so is my husband, but we've always tried to value our relationships as well. We didn't have to stick around just for the inheritance because that's going to come to us way later, and right now, we don't receive and neither do we ask for any financial help from his parents. So it was obviously out of a sense of responsibility and duty that we stuck with them. I just don't think it's fair for her to blame this whole thing on me. It's too late right now for me to talk to any of my friends about this, and I think their judgment might be biased towards me as well. And I don't want to bother my husband with this because he's asleep right now. I just can't get myself to relax until I know for sure that I'm not the one who messed up here, because I'm not the kind of person to ruin other people's relationships for my own sake. I don't want my husband to cut ties with his parents if I'm the one who's actually in the wrong here, if that makes sense. So I'd chewed my mother-in-law out when she said that my husband and I were ashamed to her and even removed him from her will because we were childless. Update 1. I'm back, and before I begin, I'll just thank everyone for their messages and comments. Thank you so much for taking the time to respond to me. It's been almost 2 days since the dinner and we're still not on talking terms with my in-laws. Not that they didn't try to reach out to us, but that was shut down by my husband because he's done with them for good now. We discussed what happened at dinner the next morning, and I also showed him the text that my mother-in-law had sent, which had really hurt me because she was making me sound like the bad guy here who'd influenced her son and made him more money-centric. But he reassured me that that was not the case at all and even admitted that he himself had only stuck around for the inheritance and nothing more. He even said that had it not been for that, He would have moved away and cut his parents off long ago. They never supported him emotionally, so the least that they could do was let him have their wealth when they no longer needed it. He said that he didn't care that he sounded materialistic right now because he'd been through enough as a kid, and even as an adult, he'd tried to put up with his parents' behavior, but he'd had enough now. He had the position he wanted, the salary he wanted, and he knew that we'd be okay, so he didn't need the inheritance anymore. Besides, his mother had already removed him from the will, so there was very little scope for things to improve between them. We decided that this was for the best, and we were completely justified in wanting to cut them off. His mother did try to contact us and even showed up at our house last night, but we refused to engage in any sort of conversation with her. There just was no point. Even if I personally wanted to mend things, it wouldn't help because my husband himself wasn't willing to talk to his mother. He told me that he's had enough of the pressure and the nagging, and he just wants to enjoy where he is now. His mother has been texting me relentlessly, blaming me for this whole situation, and still somehow trying to get me to fix things by convincing my husband to speak to her. I don't know how she expects me to help her when she keeps blaming me for things that she's brought upon herself. If she'd been a good mother, then her son wouldn't be pushing her away today, and if she'd been a good mother-in-law, then I wouldn't have been letting it happen, but she failed at both those things. So she has nobody to blame but herself for how things have turned out, and I think my husband is right in wanting to sever ties with her altogether now. Update 2. My husband and I have finally picked a house, and we're planning to start the moving process in a few days. He told his father about his decision to move away today, and his father was really upset about it. He told me that his father tried to get him to stay, but there was no changing his mind at this point. My husband told his father that throughout his life, he'd expected him to take a stand for him and talk to his mother, but he'd always been too scared of saying a word against his wife, which is what led to this, and now, he had no right to complain about anything. While my father-in-law was upset, it was still absolutely nothing compared to how my mother-in-law reacted to the news. To say that she didn't take it well would be an understatement, because she was just totally devastated. I almost felt bad for her because of how desperate she seemed to make her son stay. She visited us yesterday yet again, but this time, my husband decided to let her in and talk to her once and for all. I didn't want to be part of that unpleasant conversation, so I remained in the bedroom when he let her in. I didn't know what exactly they talked about, but my husband told me the gist of it. He'd told his mother that he didn't want to remain in touch with her anymore because of the way she's behaved and made his life nothing short of a competitive nightmare, and she started trying to gaslight him by saying that she was only trying to help him improve. But we all know that the real reason she even cared about any of this in the first place was because she'd always wanted to impress her friends and relatives. That's all it's been, and had it really been for his own sake, then she actually would have been concerned about him instead of appearances. They had a bit of an argument about this, and finally, she broke into tears and actually demanded that he cancel the move and stay here because she's not willing to let him out of her sight on his own. When he told her that he was a grown man and could make his own decisions without her permission, she turned totally hysterical and began crying and yelling at him incoherently. I heard that bit and even came out of the bedroom to check out what was happening. My mother-in-law was going crazy there, flinging cushions and screaming bloody murder while my husband tried to make a call, probably his father. I tried to talk to her to calm her down, but that backfired pretty badly, since then she turned on me and started hurling accusations at me about how I was the one stealing her son from her and putting ideas into his head. So that led to the situation getting even worse, but luckily, my father-in-law showed up just in time and took her away while she still struggled against him. It was kind of scary and sad to watch that unfold, but I was relieved that she was leaving and that we wouldn't be seeing her anytime soon. I do feel bad for her, but then her behavior today was seriously unhinged and I just don't want her coming to visit anymore. My husband agreed and said that today had been a mistake. He shouldn't have invited his mother in to talk things out like civilized people at all. She obviously still doesn't see him as an adult and only wants to control him even now. And after what happened today and the things she said, I hardly think anyone will disagree with that. I really couldn't move out soon enough. Update 3. Hi. So, I'm here with really great news. Turns out the reason I was so over-emotional these past few days was because I'm pregnant. Yeah, I took the test a few days back and I'm actually overjoyed. It literally feels like the stars are aligning for my husband and me all of a sudden. First the promotion and now, a baby. It just feels like the right time as well, so my husband and I are incredibly thrilled to be starting this new chapter of our life right now. We haven't informed my in-laws because of obvious reasons. In fact, we've actually blocked them everywhere, and my husband has told his father that if his mother shows up here after her temper tantrum the other day, he'll make sure that he calls the cops on her. He made it very clear that he's no longer interested in keeping in touch anymore, and his father agreed to stay away, even though he didn't seem particularly happy about it. Sadly, my mother-in-law decided to be so insufferably annoying about the pregnancy. She could have just waited it out for just a few weeks and then she would have been able to be a part of her grandkid's life. But now that's not going to happen because she chose to be psychotic, and I'm actually kind of relieved that she showed her true colors before the baby arrived, because I would not want any of her crazy energy around my child. Or even myself, for that matter, when I'm already pregnant, because I'm sure that'll be stressful enough as it is. We've already started the process of moving, and I'm going to make sure that my in-laws aren't able to find out where we're headed. The last thing I need is for my mother-in-law to land up at our new house once I'm pregnant, and neither does my husband. Right now, we only want to focus on our future and don't need anyone interfering with how we lead our lives anymore. All we want is for us to be happy when our baby arrives. I can't wait to become a mother.